Excuse me. I'm sorry. Okay.
Remind me to get a picture of that.
Not really. Concrete like
Everybody just get in? Yeah, 10 minutes ago. Right, that quick. How was the trip? I don't know. I wasn't on the trip. I would have liked to have been, but I wasn't. Looks like second contingent here.
who has a couple of beautiful cars back here. We're going to do some talking today about what the old nomenclature L88 is all about. It's a pretty mystical type of a automobile that I think up until about 5 years ago, some of us had heard the language but didn't know what it meant. There's been quite a bit of research done on these automobiles. From what Wayne tells me, that, what was it, 20 made, but there's 39 out there, but only 7 of them documented, or something like that. And with that, without further ado, I'll turn this over to Wayne. Okay, also in the audience today we have Ed Mueller.
Excuse me.
There he is. Ed is the owner of the 67 Coupe L88. And I believe, is it Ron Denipol? Ron owns the 68. Come on up, Ed. This was a real surprise to us. Ron had registered, gosh, a couple, 3-4 months ago and entered a 68 Corvette for judging. 2 weeks ago, I get this phone call that, did you know it was an L88? And I said, no, because it didn't say that on the information for registration. So we asked Ron to help us out here. I think we've got 3 very interesting people, and I'd like to welcome them all to you, the owners of these automobiles, that I'm sure would like to share some history about the cars themselves, and also about how they found and restored them, and some of the fun they had with them.
Glad to see everybody showed up. Sometimes you kind of worry that only 3 people are going to show up. We don't really have a prepared lesson, if you will, on what an L88 is. We thought that perhaps everybody had some questions and that we would try to answer the best we could. We all know from published figures how many they think they made. For instance, in the September 1985, it just came out, Super Chevy book, there's one page that shows all of Corvette's rarest options from 64 to 69. And all these things like M22 transmissions and L88s are all listed in here, as well as things like red stripe tires and all that. So you might want to get that if you want it all on one sheet of paper for your own use. They say they made 20 67 L88s, 80 68, and 116 69s. So they are rare cars indeed, and there's a lot of different components on them. It's very difficult to tell a real one from a non-real one if a man has no documentation to back it up, because you can assemble a car with all the components, and there are a lot of fake cars out there, as Mr. Duntov said, fraud cars. We've all heard the term counterfeits, and there are a lot of counterfeit L88s out there, just like there are counterfeit fuel injection cars. Would somebody like to start it off, and we'll get the thing rolling, maybe with some questions? Okay.
Wayne, I noticed that you had your, not to deviate here, but the Z01 car, you had the engine dyno tested. Did you do the same thing with the L88 car?
We were running such a tight schedule on the L88 that it wasn't time to get it done. I had all the machine work done in Richmond, and shipped all the parts to Texas where the car was put together, and a race car builder there assembled the engine, and fortunately everything turned out okay. From the minute they lit it up, it was all okay, and so it was not dyno tested. And the reason I had the yellow car done was I put the engine in one time before, and after very few miles I blew a head gasket, ruined the head, cracked the piston, and I decided I couldn't go through all that again. So the next time it was put together, it was all dyno tested, and I've never taken a valve cover off or anything since that was done. And it's just like it came off the dyno, went right in the car.
Wayne, did you give us some background about your
Okay, the 67 was bought brand new by Tony DeLorenzo, the son of a GM vice president. He bought it just a go racing. They took the car home, cut the windshield off, went racing that weekend. Welded a roll bar in it and took the bumpers off. And from then on it went downhill. They raced it all over the place. In fact, at Mid-Ohio, there's a picture on the book over there that shows the car when it was brand new. And it was like the first weekend out. It's this Corvette piece of the action. This is the second edition of this, and the car is still in there. And it shows it with that blue hood stripe, which nobody would buy if we didn't have that picture. And so they raced it all year long, and it belonged to Hanley Dawson Chevrolet. And it was not under warranty at that time. So the warranty plate was only issued, and the title was issued when Hanley Dawson, the dealer, actually sold the car to DeLorenzo after the end of the '67 race season, when DeLorenzo had got the '68 L88 race cars. Those are the ones that had Corning fiberglass written all over them. So you can see the warranty book back there, and it's actually dated in '68. So that's, when they sold the car was when the warranty book was issued and the title was first issued. And all of that paperwork was like '68. After DeLorenzo discarded the car then and went to, because they were racing the 68s and 69s, they changed it from A production, which it raced all year, and it came in second in the country that year. And they changed the car to B production. So their 68 L88s were A production, and this car was raced as a B production. And Jerry Thompson and DeLorenzo drove the car back to back all the time, and it won the national championship in '68 with the small block in that black car did. So, but not as it was originally intended to be, an L88. From then on, in '69, DeLorenzo had a whole team of '69 L88 cars. And Owens Corning was really backing them then because DeLorenzo was a good PR man. He was able to talk his way into something better than he was able to drive his way out of it. And he could get the money and he could get the cars, but he needed Jerry Thompson to drive the cars. So the car then was sold to a racer in Los Angeles. And he raced it for a couple of years out there, but not very successfully. And then it was bought by a man in Canada, Alberta, Canada. And he raced the car from then all the way through. He got the car in 1972. And he raced the car continuously for 10 years until 1982. And I've got 3 Corvette news magazines that show the car in different race status, and most of them are in the 72, 73 range. Like the other day, just in a clear blue, a guy came up to me and he says, I'm not interested in Corvettes. I got 3 of these Corvette news magazines, and do you want them? And I looked at them, and I had never seen this one from '73. And there's a picture of the very car in a car show in Racetrail in Canada. So I got 3 different books that show it in different phases of it being raced. Now that man never knew what he had. He had the car, and he just raced it, and he kept the warranty book. And he had the original brake calipers in a box. He had the proportion and valve. He had lots of the stuff, the heat-up block-off plates, all that was still on the car, but the car got severely changed around. I mean, everything got changed around. The car was an absolute mess. The only 2 body panels in the whole car that could be reused were the door skins. Brackets all over the frame. It had the original frame brackets that had been cut off that held the brake lines and the hoses and emergency brake things. All that stuff had been cut off, and it just had been hit hard in the side one time, and the frame had a big dent in it. It had been hit hard in the right front, and all that had been pulled back out because it was, it was a race car. You do what you have to do to keep it on the track. So, into this broker in Alberta, Canada, named John Simonson, and he had a Chevy dealership up there where he bought and sold Chevys, and not a new car dealership, but just used cars. And he started calling people all around the country, and he was trying to pre-sell the car before he bought it. And he did a good job. He he got several people, Dave Burrows and myself and one or two others, involved in bidding against each other trying to buy the car. And first off, I bought the car over the telephone for one thing, and then it turned out to be another thing, and you know, it just went round and round. And finally, it all took place, and I thought it was a crank call to start with. And he called up saying he had Tony DeLorenzo's L88 race car, and he wanted to sell it. Well, I didn't believe him, and he started reading all this information off the warranty book, and I asked him to send me pictures of all that, and he did. And he had the title and the warranty book, and he had some magazine articles and race car pictures that identified the car. And sure enough, it was real. So when it showed up, I couldn't believe it. I almost got sick. It was awful looking. And the pictures are back there. And we brought the car home in a trailer from Bloomington, and there was 3 good body panels when we brought it home. The rear deck was nice, and remember, it had no radio ever, so the rear deck with no radio help was pretty valuable. And trying to get the car to the trailer, it got away from us, and it rolled down the hill and crashed into a tree and killed the back panel. So that was 2 years ago this month, and so from then on, it was just, you know, a restoration story, getting it all together. But maybe I've answered your question with the background of the car. Anybody else?
Wait, what's the difference between an L88 engine and, say, a 435?
Okay, the L88 and the 435, the primary difference is you got 12-to-1 compression instead of 11-to-1 on the pistons. You got a heavier connecting rod. You got a different camshaft that was a racing camshaft that idled at like 1,400, 1,500 RPMs instead of a 435, you know, idled down around 700. And you had aluminum heads instead of cast iron heads. But you could get the aluminum heads on a 435, and it was called an L89. And it had high-rise intake, just like a 66 425. In fact, it uses the same casting number. So with the camshaft and compression ratio, with better quality parts and connecting rods in the camshaft and the crankshaft, you still use the 4-bolt main block, same as a 435. So that's the primary differences. And then on top, it used 67 used a 780 CFM vacuum secondary carburetor. And 68 used the same one.
Have the later model DeLorenzo cars in all color, have they surfaced yet, or are they still out there? What's the latest on that?
Well, you know, as popular as this race car thing is getting to be, and if it's any indication of what happened at Bloomington this year with half of the special collection being race cars, then I'd say if those cars are out there and can be identified, then they'll be jumping up real quick. I've got my own little story about things showing up too. I've been told by a lot of people, in the case of the ZL1, there must be 30, there must be 7, there must be something. Well, back when I first got the car, I was started to get to know this engineer at Tonawanda, and he sent me the Chevrolet document that said that there was 2. And the Super Chevy thing says there's 2. And Earl McCoy got a document from Chevrolet that said 2 when he did an article on the L88s back in 1980 in Vet Views. Well, if there's really 30 or 7, then where are they? You know, there's people that say, well, there was a blue one at Cypress Gardens and it had a aluminum motor, and I know it's real. And then there was a white one, and that one must be real. Well, the guys with the L88s, Ed's car, and mine, Dave Burrow's car, Bill Tow's car in Florida, Dave Walter's car in Florida, and a couple of others, they've all got some kind of proof that show what the cars are. And if they made 20 of them, and the joke is all 39 of the 20 have showed up, and only 7 or 8 have documents, then certainly if one of these Owens Corning cars show up, the guy will have a packet of information. He'll have pictures, he'll have race car paraphernalia. You can have all kinds of things to prove what he's got. And almost everybody in here that owns a car that's unusual has got something to back up what they say it is. So I've answered the question lots of times. Where is the other ZL1? Well, I don't know where it is, but it would really be nice when he does show up if he would have some sort of paperwork to show what he's got. Because then we won't have to say, well, where is it?
The 66 Coupe, Donnie, you went to Daytona with against the Cobras, the Sunoco colors. Is that ever determined that that was an L88?
I've heard from a good friend of mine, Mike Pillsbury in California, that it was. That's all I know about that story.
That car was supposed to be on at Lime Rock last September, the racing, hold up, something on Long Island, still hasn't been to be smuggled with all the 56 cars, the first L88.
Excuse me, I beg your pardon, I was at Lime Rock too, and I saw that car, and I have a lot of pictures and stuff on NCR, but any resemblance between the two is coincidence.
I just wanted to say,
Yeah.
Wayne,
Right.
Nolan, I went and looked at a car about 3 years ago in LA, the skill strand car, and we looked at a car that was pretty well locked in, and a fire was found in Duntov. I'm pretty sure they go in as LA, but all the small. Yes, paperwork for,
Yeah, you know something about that car.
there was all fires burned up. We looked at the work line, had a frame, and a soul trail, where the block cars on there.
You're talking about the car that was racing in Hans in 67?
Yeah, well, no, not that. That's different. No, this is a road.
I'm not familiar with it.
Okay.
When in 68, it's 24 hours. Some ADX had 3 cars. 2 were 68. One with DeLorenzo and Thompson. One Yinko and Preston. And then there was a 67 Coupe. Was that an L88, you know?
I don't know. I wish Dave Burrs was here to help with all this. I think he's, researched the racing part of it more than anyone else.
On the question about the 66 Sunoco car, the original owner was Dick Gulfstream, he bought it new. It was a 425 horse car with a big tank. No L88 66.
Again, I would just suggest on that car, the one you're talking about, a guy named Dave Morgan drove that car. And Don Yanko was part of that whole effort. And if you could ever get a hold of Don Yanko, he maybe remember.
I can answer the history on that car. I followed that car pretty close because Bill Scott's a personal friend, which he'll be here tomorrow. They prepared the car for Sunoco, and Gulfstream brought it from California right to there and raced it. That's the same one we're talking about.
I think it is.
Yes.
It was white. It was white on the top and blue on around.
The car was red initially from the factory.
That was a 66 car?
66 car.
Oh, what I'm talking about, the 67.
I don't know about that.
It was a Sunray DX. They ran a 68 with the the convertible, the removable hardtop on them, and they had a 67 with a guy named Dave Morgan who drove in that race.
Grant and Morgan raced that 67 in the 68 24 hours. It was a 67, not a 66.
That's right.
Don't we wish that one was here? Anybody else?
On the CL1, what's open on those chambers?
All right, those are open chamber heads, and you'll see a lot of 69 L88s with the closed chamber heads, and they could have come with open chamber later in the year. And it's been my impression after looking at a lot of them that there was more engines made in 68 than there were cars to use up the engines. So some very original unmolested 69 L88s I've seen had 68 engines, 68 carburetors, 68 heads, 68 everything. And business with the casting date. It's got to be within so many days before the car and all that. These things were a year off, and these had factory stampings. I mean, totally unmolested bone stock cars. And I've seen two of them in California, and they were all 68 everything, but it was in a 69 car. They all had closed chamber. So until they used all those up, the 69 open chamber heads didn't get put on the new motors, and this car is a 29,000 car, so that was well into the year. And I've seen cars in the 22,000 still had 68 motors.
It's my belief, with my 68, which I've tried to get as much information I can about 68, and of the 3 or 4 people that I know that have original 68s, the original motor, all the motors were made in the same week, 1967, which would lead me to believe, like Wayne says, they might have made 500 motors, because you could have bought an L88 motor over the counter if you wanted it. And when the 68 L88s were produced, I know of no car with 68 serial number 2000. They were all made, to the best of my knowledge, at the end of the production. And they all used motors that were made in October of 67. So,
See, that backs up with, I knew about the 69s, and I hadn't done that check on the 68s.
they claimed that L88 was supposed to be a hand-built motor or whatever. I don't know if it was or wasn't. I didn't build the motor. I didn't see the motor, but I do believe they were special engines that were something that went in a special bin or whatever. You know, it wasn't the production like that you have today.
I want to tell you a little story about that. This engineer that I got to be good friends with in Tonawanda, he furnished me the heads for the yellow car, and they were brand new 69 dated heads that somehow or another he requisitioned. But and he got them back in 69. He said that when these engines were first built, when the first aluminum engine was put together up there in Tonawanda, that it was just done as routine as any other regular cast iron engine. And it made its way back to the dyno room, and they set it up, and this big thing comes up to spin the motor. And, you know, it was supposed to build up oil pressure, and then they light it up, and they run it and everything. He said they didn't really secure those engines down very good, because, you know, the cast iron was weighed so much, and they just sat there, and they started up and ran. But when they put the aluminum motor on it, boom, it jumped right off the thing, fell down to the floor, and it broke it. So, you know, he says, now you can imagine we can spend literally $1 million developing this aluminum motor, and the very first one falls off and breaks. So then they go, you know, they get another one put together. So this time they bolt it all down, and they run it, and everybody's standing around and says, man, that is fantastic, let's ship it on out to somebody. So they're supposed to ship it out to, you know, the Corvette factory or the Norwood factory for the Camaro or whatever. So it left on a little dolly and it headed towards the stock room. Never was seen again. Never made it to the stock room. Somebody needed that one.
How long did it take to verify the seal once like that was?
Well, I can tell you that I took a little bit of a gamble, but not much. His hat went. This friend that I went to high school with, he was a year behind me. He bought the car when it showed up at the Chevy dealer in Richmond. And he immediately went out and started terrorizing everything with it. Lots of stories about the motor in the car and all that. But he had the car sitting in this gas station with no motor in it for about a year. And everybody knew it came with aluminum motor, big deal. You know, it wasn't, just nobody else thinking. I mean, maybe they made a whole couple thousand of them. So, he got a 454 cast iron motor in it. It went back to the dealer. It was sold to a gentleman who lived 40 miles away. Just recently, that guy looked me up, gave me a picture of it, 1972, you know, he put the date in the picture. So he showed me that he owned the car in 1972. He drove it around for a while. Then it got sold to a Pontiac dealership, got traded in on a station wagon or something. And so this one guy buys the car and he gets in marital trouble. And I didn't know this. But in the meantime, Richard Foxbaum wrote an article. He was talking, this is 1976, he's talking about what's going to be the magic hot lip cars in the future. He's talking about 435s, L89s, and L88s. And he said, maybe even a ZL1. So I'm at Bloomington, and I'm reading this article, and I'm watching the auction at Bloomington. I can remember just like it was today. And I said, gee, I know where one of those cars are. It was right in my hometown in Richmond. So we go back, that's in June. We go back home, and I look up this original owner. And he says, yeah, the car is still in Richmond. The guy's been in touch with me. He wanted to know if I had any parts, but he said, I know what got with him, and he works in some kitchen cabinet place. Well, that's all I could get out of it. Well, I was a salesman, and I worked selling industrial equipment. And right down the street from where I worked, every day I drove by this kitchen cabinet place. And one day, and this is in October, this yellow car sitting right out on the front row. Brand new paint job, chrome hooker pipes, big fat tire, some kind of funny mag wheel, but that stripe was on it. Well, I knew enough about the brakes and the console that had to say ZL1. I fell up under the car and the brakes were there. The console said ZL1, and I went inside and looked the guy up. And he was real proud of the fact that he knew where it came from and it used to have aluminum motor. So I bought the car that day, and it was that night before I could get the gas tank out. And I'm telling my wife while I'm trying to take it, if this thing doesn't say ZL1, I'm a real loser. Because, you know, I had paid twice what it was worth according to everybody. I paid $6 grand for it. So that's when 69s were going for $3 grand. So sure enough, there it was. And if anybody would, you know, like to see it, I brought a real nice, 8x10 color, black and white photo of that gas tank stick. If anybody wants to see it, I got it. And real clear, it says ZL1 on it. So that's how long it took, you know. But I figured it was the right car because it had the stripe and the brakes and all that.
Is there more to that story that you chased down the original engine? Do I remember that?
Yeah, when I got the car, of course, it didn't have the right motor in it. So it was, I got a loan for the $6 grand to get the car, and then I realized that I was going to try to piece the car back together, and I found that Yenko Chevrolet in Pittsburgh had new 69 dated blocks. So I went back and got some more money. And I called them up, and I went to Pittsburgh, and I got a brand new block. It was $2,200 for a bare block, and it didn't have one screw in it, just a brand new virgin bare block. So I got it home, and we had a Christmas party with all the friends, and that block was right in the middle of the road. This was a major thing. Who in the world would pay $2,200 for a bare block? So during the next 6 to 8 months, I collected the rods. If you know anything about the rods now, they're like 250 apiece. I collected the crank and the pistons and the set of heads. So I was getting all the pieces together to put the motor together. And this drag racer in the area had heard that I had pieced this all together and was going to put the aluminum motor back in the yellow car. And you remember this guy that owned the car originally was a Turo of this thing. So the drag racer called me up and he says, I've got the original motor for that car, but it's all blowed up. Bearings are bad, it's all messed up. It's going to cost you $2,200. So this number repeats itself. I guess he figured that if I was stupid enough to pay $2,200 for a bare block, I'd pay that much for a whole engine. So immediately I advertised a new motor and I sold it to a man named Don Fiore in Chicago, and he had a black 78, brand new car, and he dropped it all in half. And those things typically had problems unless they were blueprinted. He blew that motor and then he had it blueprinted. And so he sold that car, and that guy's still in touch with me. Well, the way the story goes of how the motor got separated from the car is like this. He went out the very first night when he had this car, and he raced anybody that would race him on the street. And one particular situation, he was like $7 grand. He said he buried the tack, and he was in third gear, and it just went pop. And it died. And he dropped the valve and numbered the cylinder. And so he ruined the head, punched a hole through the cylinder, and ruined the piston and all that. So this is the night that he bought it now. So the next morning, he took the motor out. He owned a gas station using the lift, the hydraulic lift, put a chain on one arm of the lift and pulled the motor up out of the Corvette and took it back to the Chevy dealer the next day and said he wanted a new motor. Lots of phone calls. You know, they called everybody. And finally, you know, they came over and they looked at it. And they had an engineer that come down from one of the engine factories. And they said, yes, a valve spring broke and the keeper broke and it dropped the valve down in, and they were going to warranty the motor. So when it came time for him to get his warranty motor, you know how Chevy dealers are. You drive in, you get what you want, you leave. Sometimes you don't even pay for it. They don't even know. So he comes in, he gets the new replacement block. He keeps the old block. He didn't give him the old block, and he sold it. And it went through 2 drag races before my guy that I bought it from, you know, identified that he had it. Well, the replacement motor, I've gotten it back now too. He put it in a boat, and that's the reason he bought the car to start with, was to get the motor for the boat. He put it in a drag boat, and he raced it a whole year before he blew a hole this big through the side of it. And it was in New York to be repaired, but the repair on the block alone was $1,600. And the man who was going to get it repaired never did do it. He lives in Richmond also. He contacted me, and I got it. It was $400. That's what he paid Zegas, the original owner of the car. That's what he paid him for the block with a hole in it. So that's how the motor came back. Chip Mueller had a situation with one of his cars one time where the original motor surfaced much longer after he got the car. And, you know, I'm sure a couple of people in here had that situation where they either tracked it down or it came back to them one way or the other.
Do you think Dick's Brando's DL1 is the original DL1 car?
You know, that's a loaded question. I'll say this, and I touched on it a second ago. It may be, or it may not be, but, and people that called me to ask me that same question, I told them this. I said, if you're going to pay that much money for any kind of car, get all the documentation in front of you, review it, and then decide for yourself. I cannot find out. I have heard that Hawthorne Chevrolet in New Jersey had a yellow one with an aluminum motor. That's the biggest piece of information I can get. And the man, my friend at the Tonawanda Engine Factory, agrees with that story about the one being in Tonawanda that was yellow. I want to repeat a little story that came to me about it. A man named Bob Cliff from Nova, Michigan, called me one day to buy some gas lines, and he starts off, and he gets through the order, and he says, now I've driven your yellow car. I said, how did you do that? He said, well, at the research building, Chevrolet Research Engineering Building, he and a man named Ralph Husband, H-U-S-E-M-A-N, had the job of driving as test engineers several days each car that they were given as part of a testing program to determine how to improve the drivability of certain cars. And they were given the yellow car after Haviland got moved to Pontiac. He said They kept it for 3 days. They burned over 36 gallons of gas a day, and they used Sunoco 260. And he said they raced anybody that would race them. And the only thing that got near them was a big block and a street rod. And it supports what Zegas, the original owner, told me, that the car was just, it was just phenomenal that you could stop the wheels from spinning, and it's still that way. It's 411. Well, when it was dyno tested, it went 523 horsepower at 7,000 RPM. And that was for the header stuff. Nah, I autocrossed a lot, and I racked up a lot of body panels, and you can ruin a car in a hurry. What I do is I buy this can of 104 octane boost, and I put that in and just the best I could buy at the pump. And it seems to do it. You have to let the clutch put it in gear when you turn it off. No, we don't get anything more than about 92 octane.
I'd like to offer a couple of things. If you're near an airport, or if you're near some people who race drag boats, you can get some very good gas. Expensive, you're going to be paying $2 or $3 a gallon. Also, I don't know if you guys know what I mentioned. I own a L88 old car sitting outside. I put more compression heads on the thing. I like to drive it every now and then. But I've experimented with some of the octane boosters, and I didn't like some of the sound I heard, and I stopped using it in a hurry. I don't see anything written to warn someone. It's really kind of scary, but some of these things I've heard are made with creosote, turpentine, and stuff that will finish right off the innards of your parts inside.
I've had that happen. I've got a drop on a green LT1. I had one time to take the paint right off. And the stuff that's 104, it eats up the carburetor gaskets.
A lot of the Rosso stuff in the cars is all crystallized.
Yeah.
And it's also, according to the doctor, that
In my car, I burn Cam 2 racing kits, which I buy from a Sunoco dealer, which he gets it from the distributor. It's $2.75 a gallon. It's 110 octane. It's more than the requirements. It's not that hard to get, except for $150 a drum. That's how it is.
Well, both has unleaded extension. Right now, leaded, I pay $2.99.
I'll tell you this too, I've tried that, and my car changes its whole personality with a good gas in it. It'll idle better, it starts easier, it doesn't backfire, and the whole sound of the engine changes.
he added that there's no good to the base lock fuel now. That's all getting so what they're adding now is different fuel. There's got to come with base lock. I have two friends who are so out of the and I'm saying, how louder to research daily. And what they can't do is just starting something they can build. This other stuff is just you're better off going to the
Paul, I left Sheraton, New York, because he built a prototype Volkswagen cylinder head. Does all his own airflow work and dyno work. He has done some baseline testing, and the curve is bad things. Everything is available. Now, he said that the things he found inside his run octane, but he also does a lot of work. And he wound up being approached by some people representing one of those names 5 weeks ago. He also did some dyno work on that and had some dyno-based information. He would feel comfortable representing that.
So develop faint version. It works real good. We did test on this. That's a better improvement over the 160 than anybody else had.
I'm saying it's very skeptical of people posting about so he's really got that. Look, we want to bring that crack in there and try to find that. But I got a thing on here. I'll base my motor for you, and then you can do whatever you want to do. Let the thing tell us what it's about. And he came away with a pretty impressive set of papers.
The best thing really to use is the aviation fuel. I've dyno tested on it. You can run anything, but the only problem with that is you got to run a top loop because you don't run sodium valves. And it runs real dry. And that's what I use. I use a Castrol top loop when I put it in the tank. You can leave it forever.
Yeah, it's got a couple.
Good afternoon. My name is Ed Mueller. I'm from northern New Jersey. Hope you're not going to hold that against me. But I am a collector. Look for unusual cars. And when I got interested in the Corvette hobby back in the mid to late 70s, L88s struck my fancy. And I started acquiring some. The collection contains the 67 that you see here right now, a 68, and two 69s. One is a 4-speed closed chamber head, and the other is probably the most unusual one I have. I bought it from the original owner very recently. It's a 69 L88 automatic with impeccable documentation. So hopefully that's going to be finished in the near future and be available at some future meets. This particular car, I don't have any unusual stories to tell you about it. It was rather straightforward. 67 L88 is something that I wanted to build into a collection. It was advertised in Hemmings Motor News in 1982 by Robert and Stephen Gold, father and son out of Minneapolis, Minnesota, who have a very extensive antique car collection, Duesenbergs and Cadillacs. They're in the restaurant business. I believe they own 2 restaurants in the Minneapolis area. And I had spoken to them by phone at the time. They described the car. There were some things that I didn't like. The documentation was somewhat sketchy at the time. It was not an original engine car. And I dismissed the car at that point. I continued to search for the 67 L88 and quickly realized that I was not about to find one with complete documentation, drivetrain, engine, and so forth and so on. The car resurfaced a year later in Hemmings for a little higher money than I had been asking the year before. I called them, they told me to come out, the car is waiting for me. I flew out there, and I was quite surprised with what I did find. The car, as you see it, is original body panels. It's an original interior that has not been touched. There's 11,500 miles, which I believe to be completely accurate on the car. The car does have the original transmission in the car. I found that it did have a 427 4-bolt main block with a lot of the L88 components with the car. And I realized at that point in time that it could be brought back, as you see it now. It did have the road trip tube still with it. It had aluminum heads. It has new pin calipers with the car. It had the right distributor cap, which is unusual too. An L88 at that point in time. It had original plug wires, as you see. There were some parts missing, but some of those were secured right over the counter at Chevrolet. The aluminum radiator had long been replaced by a copper radiator, although it was still available. The proportioning valve was missing, and again, that was still available at the time from General Motors. The car was brought back from Minneapolis and stored for several months while I don't have the ability or the knowledge to do these cars myself. And when searching for somebody to do the car, I was introduced to Merle Dobbins out of Glenside, Pennsylvania, and decided that he was the man that should do this particular car for me. And it's recently been finished, about a 1.5 year restoration. There's not much more than I can add, except I guess my contribution to this project, I left out the important part. When I bought the car, I did have a gas tank sticker. But as you know, a gas tank sticker doesn't identify anything. It identifies that a car was built like this at one time. And that's what I bought, was a gas tank sticker and the car. Very little information from the Golds. They couldn't even remember the fellow's name that they bought it from. So I had while Merle Dobbins was doing the restoration, I was spending my time running around trying to completely document the car. Wayne mentioned Hawthorne Chevrolet. I happen to own a business in Hawthorne. Went to Hawthorne Chevrolet with my gas tank sticker. Within a few minutes, they identified the original selling dealer, Lang Chevrolet Sales out of Fairborn, Ohio, with the code. From there, I picked up the phone. They told me the man's name that owns the agency. I picked up the phone and called the gentleman. He answered the phone. I didn't answer the phone. I was connected to him. I mentioned the car to him. You got to remember, this is over 18 years. He said, yes, I know the car. I said, that's incredible. How do you know the car? Because it was an L88. And he said, no, he said, I remember it was a hot rod or something. But he said, the reason I remember the car is the fellow traded in a 1967 Corvette, won a 67 Corvette, which some of the documentation I brought along, which Lang supplied to me, you can see a sales invoice with a trade-in, 67 Corvette convertible traded in on this car. I asked him if he had any documentation. He said, let me get back to you. And I thought, well, you know, what are my chances? A half hour later, the phone rang with the gentleman's name who bought the car, his address from 18 years ago, who I still can't find, I'm looking for, with all the options. I asked him to send me the documentation. He said it was on microfilm, but he would print me copies. After the meeting, if you'd like to walk in the back, I put some of those up on the board for you to take a look at. So that's the history of the car. It's not particularly exciting. It's rather straightforward. It's the pride of the collection right now, just because of the rarity. It's what I think an L88 should be, black on black with a red scoop, in deference to Wayne, and black roll tires. I don't know if anybody has any questions on the car. Merle Dobbins is in the audience here, and Merle did the restoration on the car. Yes?
Am I right assuming you bought the car, everything was there pretty much except the block?
Well, what I bought, the casting date on the motor when I bought the car was 1970. It's a 427 block. It had aluminum heads on it. We had one aluminum head on, which I presume to be from the original motor, but I can't swear to that, simply because the dates were close. One was an aluminum head that was later when the car was built, so we have to assume obviously that was not with the motor. Most of the restoration had to do with the engine compartment, trying to get everything dialed in as we know it today from the information, particularly from Dave Burrows and Wayne, of course. Yes. No, I haven't. Good. Thank you. Yes. Yes. I am told that the aluminum heads were definitely painted in 1967. Then they went natural in 68, 69.
Wouldn't it be nice if they weren't just running Duntov?
It kind of hurt me to see those heads being painted, to be honest with you. I was very, very tempted to say no, but again, as part of this organization, we're trying to take the knowledge that we're exposed to and try to dial these cars in as close as we can. I've come a long way in this hobby. I started out wanting a car that was absolutely just a killer. No overspray. Just a diamond. And of course, I've come. If you look at that car later on, you can see see all the overspray and an interpretation again, like I guess we're all trying to do at this point, of what these cars were. The other interesting point in the car, it came with a 456 rear. And as I understand that, that was an L88 option only in 67. In fact, most of the factory brochures I see don't list the 456 rear. I might talk about a little bit of history, and the research on the car is ongoing. And bear in mind, purchase is only a year and a half old at this point. I do know the car that was raced, was obviously raced at some point. I have contacted the third owner of the car. I believe I'm somewhere around the 6th or 7th, but when the documentation is all through, I can describe maybe on the 15th car. The third owner of the car is a man by the name of Steve Gray in Rantoul, Illinois. In fact, he's the manager of the Chevrolet agency there. He owned the car in the early 70s and did campaign it on the drag strip. The only modification we can find is to the chassis, which has been left at this point. I'm assuming just big wheels and tires were added at that point. Yes? Not to my knowledge. Not to my knowledge at all. Of course, the big tanks would be something else again in the back, but I'm not aware of that. No, I don't know if anybody else can add anything to that. No, you talk about a car leak or leak?
Yeah, I thought I remember
Not to my knowledge. I've never heard of that.
restorations. And I kind of thought, you know, these Corvettes, one good thing about them is they were expensive when you could buy them. I mean, a 63 Bel Air and a 63 Corvette, there was a difference in the price. And the second of all, they didn't make very many. They made 20,000 a year or whatever. So I'm saying, if you got a 63 Impala, it might be a beautiful car, but you could probably find 3,000 beautiful ones. But when you're... So originally I thought, well, gee, the car to have might be a split window with fuel injection, because everybody that ever doesn't know anything about a Corvette, and you mentioned you got one, the first thing they ask, even if it's a 74, they say, is it a split window? So I was considering one, but I couldn't find a nice one. I mean, I'm in a restoration business, and you can make things nicer than new, but there's some things you can't make. And a real nice car that's original, it has its place in the light. So I remembered that I also had a drag racing car. And I remember a guy that I knew in 1968, well, it was in 69 at the time, I went to drag races. And this guy pulls in with a brand new black Corvette on the back of a trailer. And I was impressed. I mean, at that time, I was not a fan of big black. 427 didn't mean nothing to me, you know. But when I seen that car run, I said, boy, what a car, what a car. Not that he set the national record or anything, but I'm saying, boy, when he slammed that thing in second gear, street tires on the back, and wheels come off the ground. I says, no, I'm impressed. But now it's years later, and I'm going, I wonder if he still got that car. So I go see the guy. His name was Richard Sullivan. Well, Richard, he was single, lived with his parents. His first car was a 63 FI car. He got new when he was 18. Then he swapped that and got a 65 396 Coupe. And he didn't like that, so he bought a 67 435 horse Coupe. Well, when the L88 came out, he didn't know it. Because if he did, he was not hurting for money. And he was a street racer at heart. He would have had one. He had his Hot Rod magazine or whatever and give the specifications on this car. So they called his own rep. Sure enough, they made a car. So he swaps his 67 black 435 horse Coupe for the L88. and he orders the car, black on black. He didn't receive the car until like July of the next year. He ordered the car in the end of '67. Well, at any rate, we get talking about the car, and I ask him if he wants it every month, whatever. And every time we discuss it a little more. And finally, after about 6 months, and after me almost doubling the offer that I made him in the beginning, I'm the proud owner. The car, my particular car, is an L88, naturally. It's 456 gears. It is 3,800 miles. He decided, well, I'm going to go drag racing. So he took the motor out of the car. He took it to Duffy's Performance in Red Bank, New Jersey. They bored the motor 30 over. They put a General Kinetics, whatever camshaft in the car. He was going to run B Sports. Well, he was a kind of drag racer. They really didn't belong in it because they were a class, because there wasn't enough cars in participation in B Sports. So he would have to run modified production or gas or whatever, which would mean he could have 2 4-wheels sticking out of the hood and all that kind of stuff. Fortunately for me, he never modified the body or interior of the car. The only body modification, that's about it. Two things I was really impressed. When I picked the car up, the motor was out of the car. Because his feelings were, well, I'm not going to go racing anymore. This isn't, you know, I'm going to put the car back on the street. So I'll take the motor out of the car, and I'll put the original camshaft back in the car, I guess. So the car would sit there for me, fortunately. Another thing that I was really pleased about is when we were making the deal, one of the things that really impressed me excited me about getting this car is when we opened up the little compartment in the back where your glove box is. But when you open the hood on that car, it's impressive. And that car, my car has 456s in it. I've shifted it at 7,500 RPMs before. And it's a sensation we can talk all day about. When you step on it, I don't care if you're in 4th gear. I'm not saying the car will go 292 miles an hour, but it will accelerate. That I will certify. Is there anything anybody would like to know about it? Yes? Yes. I can't tell you. But the rules in drag racing were you were allowed to up to 30 overboard engine. Now he had a car with 2,800 miles on it that didn't need boring, wasn't nothing wrong with it. But he figured, well, I got to have that extra 6 or 10 cubic inch or whatever you get. It truly is a sensation that I know. I bought about 150, I buy 1 drum of gas a year. I get 4 miles to the gallon. At the end of the year, there's no gas. They really don't do anything. If you're ever riding an L88, they're rough riding. They're not electric cars. They're not smooth riding. You hit a bump in the cars like this, you know. And I can't understand why that car, the way it's set with street tires, would really be all that exciting to try on a Trans Am course, because it's got too much horsepower, and the tires of today it could be improved. Thank you.
Last fall, we had Dick Ulster at our local chapter for a guest speaker. And he told of his first experience driving an L88 at Daytona, where he had trouble where his foot kept saying, push pedal, but his foot kept yelling back, no, this is too much. And they clocked him, as I recall the story, it was 182 miles an hour on the back straight at Daytona. This was when they took that car from California, unloaded it, and let's see what it'll do. I mean, they had no idea. So I'm sure what you say, the experience of driving one has got to be just outside. Guys, I'd really like to thank you. It's terrific. And this is what NCRS is all about. Some fun-loving guys sharing their own private pieces with us. I just think it's super when we can get the volunteer effort. And this is one of the best examples we've seen in years, really. These guys voluntarily brought these cars up. We asked them if they would, you know, traveling from Virginia and going south and north. 5 minutes.